Civilization 5 is a video game. It's also a video game you can mod aggressively. So for this day from Neremik, I figured that I'd mod said game aggressively and drag one of my friends along to have the fun. I ended up playing Cyno from Genshin Impact, also known as Anubis, because that mod unfortunately doesn't exist yet, and my friend played Arceus from Pokemon because we thought playing two gods was pretty funny. As for the AI, you're glad to know that this was also completely modded. So we decided to drag in Tommy Wiseau from the room, Xi Jinping and Theresa May to have some, real people in there I guess, Morshu from the Zelda CDI games, Blaze the Cat because, we already had it installed honestly, and the Chicken Man himself Gus Fring for a total of 8 whole players. Now jumping into the game, how my civ specifically works is whenever I found a religion I get a bonus belief that not many other people have access to. Off the bat I also have a shrine which starts giving me one faith a turn, so we're pretty cool. And a few turns into the game I run into an ancient ruin which gives me enough faith to found a pantheon. Just like any sane person I decided to get the wonderful perk that gives me 10% growth rate for the entire game. All the other perks here are alright, but this is the only one that gives you a persistent benefit throughout. And then we proceed for a certain while. Eventually we end up finding out that Mr. Xi Jinping himself, Morshu and Blaze the Cat share a continent with us. On the wonders front it was practically business as usual. I built Stonehenge being the more religiously focused of the group, and Ben went ahead and built a great library so that we had very good science and very good religion off the bat so we could get our maximum benefits. If you're wondering what Ben's perks are, he gets more of an influence with city-states as his passive thing. His main unit is a bit and his building is a replacement for the Great Temple, in which he can only build once, however it gives him 10 faith, 10 happiness and 10 culture, so needless to say, it's a pretty good trade. Needless to say, having Stonehenge, I was the first person in the game to found a religion. I decided to make sure that my bonus belief was the merry little thing known as Tithe. Again, one of the perks which is so insanely busted compared to everything else, I have no idea why it is in the game. But go does because that gives me something to spend my faith on that isn't missionaries, and it's also can just kind of run in the background. And of course my bonus belief, I made sure that my religion would spread 20% further away, because that's just kind of neat. As for the symbol, I chose the funny Shinto one, and I wanted to give this a custom name, so I called upon the advice of the ancients, and they told me to name it
Years ago, I was Chinese.
Unfortunately there wasn't enough characters, so we had to butcher it down to Year Ago I China. Around this time we both ended up settling our second cities. I made sure to settle mine to the south, whereas Ben settled his to the right. This is also where the actual positioning of everyone on our continent came into view, and we realised that we had really hit the jackpot, because we had way too much good land to work with, without competition, before anybody else could jump on it. Or so we thought. See, as I settled my new city known as Nubia, China came in and settled a city that was literally bordering on it. Most of the continent was still unclaimed at this point, they were here. So, needless to say, time passed and China declared war on us. Now, war isn't good for a number of reasons, mainly because Ben had just made his religion and that had swords into plowshares being its main thing. If you don't know what that does, it's food growth that is completely negated by being at war. So, eventually, after chiseling away at China and scraping by making sure my own city isn't taken, I managed to rip their own city out from the ground, raise it, and make peace with them. We didn't want to go nuclear on China just yet, we wanted to maintain peace so we could slowly creep up in the ladder, but needless to say, the setback wasn't all that appreciated. That said, our main strategy was going for Liberty first on the tree, given it gives you the most helpful things out of the bunch, maxing that out and both getting ourselves great scientists to bump up our science production. Afterwards, we both ended up doing tradition as well, that further bumping up our food growth rate, whereas I later split off to go do rationalism, whereas Ben took a slight detour into patronage to win over city-states, which somehow we hadn't found any of yet. Yes, weirdly enough, the continent that we were on had no city-states within sight, meaning we were severely behind by the time the World Congress got founded. Speaking of science though, we made sure to completely beeline universities to make sure we stayed ahead of the AI. While we are playing on the standard difficulty, it's also the one where the AI is pretty much on your level, and if it plays small or gets a little bit lucky, it will steamroll you. And the best way to stay ahead of that in pretty much every single regard is science. You beat them to wonders and you beat them to any cool techs which allow you to completely steamroll them. It's the main reason we were able to kill Tianjin, and it's mainly an advantage I don't plan to give up on. Though a completely unknown advantage we'd been accumulating was that, yes we had our wonders and yes we had our religions and stuff, but we were starting to go out of food in food control. This doesn't become too apparent now, but around the midpoint of the game we had about 18 populations in our cities, which is decently big, but I'd been given the Temple of Artemis, which gives a further 15% food growth. Stacking that in with my own religion benefit, and the fact that I've just generally got a lot of farms, mine and Ben's cities both proceeded to completely skyrocket in citizens. And if you're wondering why that's completely broken, it means there's more people available to do more tasks, which means you get more done, and completely start to break the game as you basically just have more hands to do more tasks, and completely chew through your enemies. On the religious front, things were getting a bit weird. I just built a wonder which had given me 3 missionaries to go spread the good word with, but the continent got a bit contested with religion. Ben had his, which was fine, he wanted to keep it to his own cities, but unfortunately China and Morshu had both made their own religions, being Catholicism and Hinduism respectively. In order to do that, I basically had to cut them off in pressure to make sure it couldn't spread too much. The more cities I have converted, the harder it is to spread to new cities. So I made good use of those 3 missionaries, doing some interesting stuff with the borders to make sure they remained fully efficient, and before long I had at least enough of a grasp on other cities in the region to where my pressure was decent enough to beat these guys back so it wouldn't become a reoccurring issue in the future. And that's when things started looking dire. Mind this has all been condensed in and around the time I was at war with China briefly, and it just so happens that in the turns leading up to the end of that war, Morshu had accumulated an army and launched an attack on one of Ben's cities. So, having just got riflemen, we completely shot to Ben's aid and just barely managed to scrape Morshu away from him, although we weren't able to nick any of his cities yet. Once again, pushing him back just allowed us to keep developing an advantage, so next time we'd be a bit more prepared. It was a very close call, especially with my troops coming in last minute, and a failed city take, but we'd rather not lose any cities of our own than lose out on the opportunity of nicking somebody else's. So the tech push goes on with me and Ben confidently claiming any wonders that we want to before the AI even have a chance. We think with smooth sailing and having not been in a war for a while, things are pretty good. Our religion's going strong, our city's getting all the improvements built, and we've got a decent road system on the way now. And I've just enhanced my religion for the first time, which means that I've successfully filled out every single slot. I ended up picking Holy Order and Divine Inspiration for my 2 new perks. One, make sure that I get profits at least 30% cheaper, which is always a nice benefit. And the second thing, taking advantage of the fact that we were essentially Mr. Worldwide over here, gave me +2 faith for each world wonder in a city, which is just chef's kiss. While it may not be exactly apparent on the recording, I wasn't exactly super far ahead in the religion game at this point. Stonehenge had given me the advantage of being the first one there and, you know, able to spread it quite early, and those missionaries definitely came in handy, but my faith output was pretty low before I made this change, and making it meant that I was able to keep competing on those guys to kind of keep my foothold as much as possible. My finance wasn't doing awful, but if I started losing a lot of space to somebody else's religion, tithe would come down and I'd be in a bit more of a financial pickle. Speaking of competition though, just as we were starting to discover astronomy to cross the seas, astronomy came to us actually. We were found by Gus Frank, who settled Lost Point of St. George, once again to the left of Nubia. I'm not sure what it is with this game's obsession, and also Tommy Wiseau, who ended up sitting on the far bottom right corner of our continent as well. This gave one of them the ability to find the World Congress and start firing out proposals left, right and centre. When I say the World Congress really didn't do much in changing the tide of the game, I truly mean that. I think they banned cotton and that was the only resolution that ended up having a significant impact. Everything else was either an event which I scored pretty well in, or just didn't affect me. The only thing we were particularly concerned about was scholars and residents, which would allow people to catch up in science. But given that wasn't proposed by any of the AI while they were still in control, it wasn't all that big of a hassle. As we did set out to start exploring the ocean, however, we finally started building research labs and hospitals, which further boosted our food and science. This is essentially what won us the game, because at that point, getting hospitals just put the cap on our food. And given we were both closing in at 40, if not over that population at this point, and the fact research labs buffed our already pretty good science output compared to the others, we were set. And the fact Tommy Wiseau just settled a city against my borders was, honestly, not even enough to deter me. We were pretty sure we were going to win this. And then, just as we started fully exploring the world, we got access to satellites so we could actually see what was going on, and we adopted ourselves some ideologies. The World Congress did something. With Gus Fring in charge, and Gus Fring going the Order ideology while me and Ben were both on Freedom, he voted to make Order the world ideology. And after some misvoting on my part, where I put not all of my nay votes into that, Order was made the world ideology, which meant that me and Ben now had a dissidence that we had to handle because that was starting to tank our happiness. And if our happiness got too low, the game wasn't going to be all too kind to us. So we started a rapid fight to start building all the happiness buildings we could to stave off until the next World Congress. The issue is while satellites had revealed the whole world, we still had to physically travel to city-states in order to properly meet them so we could start paying them off to be our friend and give us extra votes in the whole thing. But we managed to stave it off barely. We were able to repeal, which put us neutral, and we were able to properly instate freedom as the world thing, but that was after ages of fighting and shifting all of our focus onto happiness compared to what we had been. Essentially, whether it knew it or not, the AI had distracted us long enough to be able to catch up. Realising that we were probably slipping in our ultimate potential, me and Med both ended up settling our surge cities, mine down and to the left of Nubia, just a few tiles off where the Chinese city had been, but adjusted enough so it could finally count as an ocean city, and bends more towards the lake in the middle of our continent, just to allow himself some fishing potential. With our exceedingly high growth, this should have allowed us to start catching up in production and science if we played our cards right, which arguably it did. And arguably that came in handy as Morshu declared yet another war. The issue is this time is we just finished researching the atomic theory and Ben had a few nukes lying around. To say Morshu did not have a good following a few minutes would be an understatement. His capital was down to like 7 if not 3 population at one point. Genuinely, if we wanted to, Morshu would have been out of the game then and there. The issue was he'd actually caught up. Once again, he was able to just push us enough to where we weren't able to nab his cities. But it's still fine. Hampering his capital city was hopefully enough to keep him from bothering us again, and with all the nuclear fallout he had to clean up, we were hoping that it'd delay him enough in science so that the next time he wanted to have a war, we'd have more of a drop on him. That said, realising we were approaching the end of the tech tree, me and Ben decided the best course of action was to finally take out the Bing Shilling nation itself. Descending on China and killing it took literally a matter of turns, and as a show of gratitude we decided to give them to Tommy Wiseau, who hadn't been doing all that well on the leaderboard until that point, and he seemed quite happy. The only blunder we did is that we didn't end up cleansing the holy city of Catholicism in our little reign of China, which is an issue because it meant Tommy wasn't going to do it and we'd have to take it back. It was a whole mess and it essentially meant we couldn't wipe the thing off the map, but I went around claiming all the cities around it, so it made a little bit of a pressure vacuum and made it practically impossible for that religion to get any more of a foothold. Now the thing is, past this point, the game was essentially won. At any point we could have built and assembled a rocket, launched it, and we would have won. But for some reason, and mind you this was being recorded on like 3 hours of sleep, we wanted to make the world just kind of suffer and give most of it to Tommy Wiseau. Everything was fine, everything was chill, and we started a war on Morshu, nuking him once again and invading him with giant death robots. And that's when we realised that Tommy Wiseau was not only in a war with Theresa May on the other continent, which we'd practically ignored up until this point, but what was worse is that he was losing, and it was only a matter of turns until the famous city of Mark's Love Shack was completely and utterly razed to the ground. With my options limited and running out of time, I started launching giant death robots over the ocean, training XCOM squads to paradrop immediately in, and I kid you not, with barely a turn left to spare, we were able to descend on Mark's Love Shack and wrangle it back from the hands of the filthy British Empire before such a holy site could have been destroyed. Of course, we gifted the Holy Land rights back to its correct owner, and we went and took the city of the Room back as well, although we kept this one to ourselves in the event we wanted to go for a domination victory. After clearing things up with Britain, and by which I mean eradicating all of their cities until they went out the game, we decided that Gus Fring, being the closest thing we had to an adversary at that point, given the fact that we were genuinely completely cracked in every single aspect at this point, we decided to go to war with Gus Fring. Needless to say, he didn't stand much of a chance. His cities did have the highest defense out of all of them, but when you mass produce enough XCOM squads and giant death robots, it's only a matter of time until your neighbour dies. It still did take a little bit of time to go through though, so being in control of 2 holy cities, one for the Room and one for England, me and Ben both purged them of their religion and made sure to send in some of our own prophets to start doing the converting. Needless to say, the little bump to my economy that Tithe gave me from doing that went very appreciated. And yes, Gus Fring continued to fizzle out of existence. Morshu also slowly started to recede piece by piece. Things were looking rather good. And then Blaze the Cat got invaded and we kind of had to take that back. Yeah, I kind of forgot she was in this game. She set up some cities in a straight line and that was kind of it. She had literally no bearing on the game, but you know, it's fine. She did manage to survive until the end. The same couldn't be said for Morshu, who was swiftly meeting his fate, Xi Jinping, Theresa May, or Gus Fring, but you know, after the eradication of half the world leaders, finally, the world kind of knew peace. and needless to say, a few turns later we practically had our choice platter of which victory we wanted to go for, which pretty much brought the game to an end. Yeah, it was quite a short game, only lasting 6.5 hours. Jesus Christ. But yeah, it was a short game and an even shorter one to recap. Do let me know if you're interested in seeing another attempt at this. I did say I'd do this as a demo run of the model, but yeah, no, let me know what you think of these videos, if you think I should give them more breathing room, less breathing room, or whether they should be lively commentated. I am interested to hear your thoughts and opinions if you want to see this format return or not, and if so, in what style. But that is our game summarised, in which two quite literal gods proceeded to beat the shit out of a Zelda character, two world leaders, and the imaginary chicken man. So, with all said and all that aside, hopefully you did enjoy this very weird episode of the 12 Days of Neremik, and thanks for watching guys. My name has been Neremik, and peace out.